Alright, match day 2 is done in the World Cup. Now we can take a look and see how our Chelsea boys are doing. Oh no. What's up guys and welcome back to the Blues and Stripes. So once again we are here to talk about the Chelsea players at the World Cup. And unfortunately, unlike last time, there's really nothing great to talk about here, but I have once again pulled up the stats for everybody. But before we get into that, there is something else that I did want to focus on, because while I know sometimes ratings don't really reflect how the players have performed, I think it is important to at least look at the ratings and see how not just our players, but also the rest of the team performed as well. So I went ahead and pulled up all the ratings for all the teams, outside of France, just because Gusto, he didn't really play that much, so his rating isn't going to really reflect too much for him. But I did go ahead and pull up his stats just so we could talk about that as well. But to kick it off, we'll go ahead and talk about 3 of the games that did not turn out well for our Chelsea Blues. So first of all, for Ecuador, we saw a 0-0 draw against Curacao, which, for Curacao, it's a great result. They already had their first goal against Germany. Now they get a 0-0 draw against, honestly, I would say Ecuador might be considered one of the dark horses. I don't think anybody expects them to go on and win it, but they performed pretty well in qualifiers. So a 0-0 draw here is actually really impressive. But anyways, back to Chelsea. So yes, obviously Ecuador didn't have the best of games. And you can see for Caicedo here, he got a 6.9, which actually is the second highest or tied with second highest rating on the team, at least from the starting 11. And I will admit this was one of the 2 matches that I wasn't able to watch all the way through. I did catch this one more than I did Argentina's match, which is the other one I didn't really watch all the way through. So I did see some of the moments with Caicedo in this match. I will admit didn't seem like he was having his best match, so maybe I just missed some of the moments that did give him a slightly higher rating. But yeah, some of his passes went awry. I don't know if the stats are going to reflect that, but I typically see him being a good connector in the midfield, keeping the ball moving really well. Now, one thing I will say is it seems to me like he's sitting a bit deeper playing for Ecuador than he does playing for Chelsea. For Chelsea, he kind of just is allowed to roam and go win the ball back wherever. As long as there's a holding midfielder in there like a Santos or a James, they can hold that space and allow him to roam. That's what he does really well. It seems like for Ecuador, he's not allowed to go do that. He just has to sit in the middle and basically wait for the play to come to him. So maybe that's part of why he's not playing at his best at the moment. But again, a 6.9 is a pretty solid rating, even if they didn't manage to get the win. Next up, we've got Senegal, who lost 3-2 to Norway, and it's hugely disappointing for Senegal. I think I said in the last video, Senegal and Norway are going to be the 2 teams fighting it out to try to be the second place team, and this kind of confirmed Senegal is not going to be that team. Now, whether or not they are good enough in 3rd place to make it through is yet to be seen, but I don't think chances are very high. So they're really going to have to go out there and put in a good solid performance. I think it's against Iraq for the final match, but it's very disappointing considering we have 2 Chelsea players on here. Granted, one of them has not played yet, but looking at Nicholas Jackson up top, you can see one of the lowest ratings in the team. Obviously, the defense got a little bit lower than him, but it's disappointing in the fact that he did assist one of their 2 goals, and he still ended up with a 6.0. Kind of tells you just how bad his performance was overall, if even an assist couldn't keep him that high. And admittedly, I am one that I want Jackson to come back to the club. I want to see him do well. I want to see him and João Pedro fighting it out for that top spot as a striker. And I will say this is not a good look for him so far. These first 2 matches with Senegal, he's just not been on top of it. So hopefully this is not a sign of things to come. I'm really hoping that Xabi Alonso can work with him and get him back to where we saw him a couple seasons ago, where yeah, he wasn't the most clinical finisher, but he's still a good player. He still provides a lot for the team. As a lot of people pointed out, he brought the best out of Palmer because of his runs and his link-up play with him. So fingers crossed that that's what's going on here. But moving on, we have the final disappointing result for our Blues, which is, of course, England 0-0 draw against Ghana. Now, I wouldn't say this is detrimental. I think England... Now, this is definitely not detrimental. I think England have already beaten the best team in their group, and I think they'll probably comfortably handle Panama on the final day. But still, considering the hype around this team, this does feel like what a lot of England fans complained about before under Southgate, which is just a very disappointing, drab performance. 0-0 draw, nothing really going forward. I didn't watch the whole of this match, but I caught most of it, and it was just nothing. Like some great chances near the end, and Kane with the rocket over the goal. I don't know what he was thinking there, but they did create some chances as the game wore on, but it was already too late. They didn't put away their chances early on. And I do have to wonder from Tuchel's point of view, I don't want to make this an England video, but I do have to wonder about the lineups he's putting out. Because I do understand the mindset when it comes to having Madueke and Gordon in against Croatia. Because Croatia is going to step out a bit more. They're not going to pack it in. And so having Madueke and Gordon with their pace, with their work rate to try to get back as well and win the ball back, I think those are 2 understandable choices. But now you're up against Ghana, they're probably not going to step out as much. That was a majority of what I saw. And Madueke especially, it's one of the problems he had at Chelsea, and honestly one of the problems I saw when he played for Arsenal too. He's not good at trying to break down a low block. He's just always always going to go backwards with it. So really odd decision from Tuchel in that sense. But once again, not going to go too hard into England on this one. Looking at Reece James, granted he was better than all of the attack and midfield, but of the defense, he is the weakest one, which is pretty disappointing from his standards. Now, we'll see what the stats say, but I'm expecting him to have pretty good defensive stats, but his passing, his attacking stats, that's where I put him a league ahead of most fullbacks, because he does the defensive part really well, but he also gets up in the attack. He puts in great crosses. He links up the play really well. So it doesn't really seem like he did that in this match. But again, we'll see if the stats confirm that. But yeah, 6.0 for him is not really a great rating overall. But then we had two good results, which is, of course, first of all, Argentina versus Austria, 2-0 win. Fernandes fully involved, 90 minutes in this one. But as you can see, not really anything special. Now, nobody outside of Messi performed incredibly well, to be perfectly honest, or at least based on the ratings. But it does kind of show the one issue with Fernandes I think has been discussed before. If he's not scoring goals, he's not really involved. That's the one thing he did well for Chelsea, but he's not really involved in the build-up play. He's not assisting that much, and that's something that he needs to add to his game. So the fact that he wasn't involved in either of the goals, at least as far as I could tell, and he ends with just a 6.6, it's not terrible, but it's not impressive for what we want to see from him, especially to raise his overall valuation too. And then finally, probably the most disappointing of all of them, we have a 5-0 win for Portugal, but Neto, the worst performer out of everybody, wasn't involved in any of the goals. He came off, I think, at halftime, and at that point it was 3-0, so the fact that he still ends with a 6.3, it's not a good look. This is a match where Ronaldo's had all of these doubters coming out saying all these things about him, and so here's a nice easy country for him to go put a brace in to kind of silence those doubters and help up the hype for himself before eventually, Portugal probably gets knocked out in the first round. I'm not a hater or anything, but for Neto, the fact that he turns in a 6.3 performance, it's not a good look, and I'll see how the stats reflect that. So with that, now we get into the actual stats for the game, and this is going to look a little bit different because on FotMob, they only show the total stats whenever you pull up a player's profile for each competition that they were in. So because I had to actually go to the game's performance itself and click on each individual player, it looks a little bit different than last time, but I'm still able to pull up all of their stats for this game in particular. So with that being said, let's get into this. So first up, we have Moises Caicedo. As you can see here, his overall rating is actually a bit higher on FotMob, but I think that's because they use a different rating system. So maybe I should start looking at it here instead of on whatever Google pulls up. But starting off with the heat map here, you can see all over the midfield. He did get up a little bit, but probably because Curacao were sitting so deep, he was allowed to get up there. But like I said, I do think he was sitting a bit deeper in the formation itself, where sometimes with Chelsea, we'll see him get up more so around the top of the box, maybe have some shots from the top of the box, which is something he does really well. It doesn't seem like he did any of that in this match, basically providing that defensive buffer in there. Another nice little highlight here, he did have the most touches in the match, so that's nice. Obviously, no goals and assists. He did have 4 chances created, 1 big chance created, so that's pretty good. 1 shot on target. He doesn't typically take a whole lot of shots, but he does have really good shooting capability, so it might be something that Ecuador needs to rely on a bit more in the future. He had 18 passes in the final third, 3 out of 5 accurate crosses, 5 out of 10 accurate long balls. Was never dispossessed, so that's good. But yeah, the defensive contributions, only 5, which again, I do expect him to have a bit more in a match, but also they're playing Curacao, so probably didn't see them getting forward too much. But 2 tackles, 1 block, 1 clearance, 1 headed clearance, 1 interception, 10 recoveries, dribble pass twice, and then his duels down here, you can see 3 out of 5 ground duels won, 1 out of 3 aerial duels won, and that's about it for him. So it does feel like he did keep that midfield pretty compact in there, didn't make any mistakes, which is good, but I do think he has a lot more potential to take the game by the scruff of the neck and really contribute, whether it's with his goals, whether it's with winning the ball high up the pitch and creating an opportunity. That's what we've seen him do for us a whole lot. So the fact that he's not really doing that for Ecuador, I don't know if that's because they're not utilizing his strengths. It does seem like he's just more so sitting centrally. And if he isn't being played to his strengths, I wonder if they would, if maybe they'd be having a little bit more joy right now. But with all that in mind, I'm probably going to give him a rating of a 6.8. I know it seems a bit low considering what they've rated him, but I do think he has the potential to do a lot more in the match. And especially considering that this game ended in a 0-0 draw, it's hugely disappointing for Ecuador, and I think because he can provide more, because he does have the potential to provide more, I think I'm judging him a bit harsher than I would some other players. But moving on now, we are on to Enzo Fernandez. Like I said, the FotMob rating is a little bit higher here. He is actually the 3rd highest rated player on the pitch instead of I think he was 5th or 6th before. But you can see for his heat map, he's kind of not really getting up into the attack a whole lot. He's sitting a bit deeper. When he gets up, it's mostly on the left side. He's not really crashing into the box as much as I think he does whenever he plays for Chelsea. And like I said before, that is something that he does very well, but he needs to contribute in other ways, and I just don't think he's quite doing enough in that regard. As you can see, his XG, very low. His expected assist, very, very low. He had only 1 chance created and 2 block shots. That is just not good enough. And even his passing, 90%, 63 out of 70, he should be getting on the ball more. He should be creating more, and it's just not something that he does well. And it's part of why I think there are quite a few Chelsea fans that are okay with him leaving, because I don't think he provides enough outside of his goals that gets people excited to want to see more of him, and it's why he has been such a divisive character for most of his time here. But he also had 85 touches, 3 in the opposition box, 1 successful dribble, 10 passes into the final third, 3 out of 5 accurate long balls. He was dispossessed once. And the defensive contributions, 5, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 1 head clearance, 1 interception, 7 recoveries, dribble past once, and he won 50% of his ground duels, 67% of his aerial duels. So funny enough, he actually is doing a bit more defensive work for Argentina, which I guess sort of makes sense. I mean, if you look at this 4 in the midfield, Almada, Fernandez, McAllister, DePaul, all of them a lot more attack-minded, in my opinion. I don't really know DePaul very well, but definitely with these 3, I know Almada from his little bit of time here in Atlanta, and then Fernandez and McAllister I know well because of the Premier League. These are 3 very attack-minded players, all playing in midfield. There's no real defensive-minded players in here. So of these 4, I guess Fernandez is probably the most defensive-minded. Again, I don't really know much about DePaul, so maybe that's why he's in this team, is because he does work hard to win the ball back. He doesn't do it a whole lot. I mean, 5 defensive contributions isn't super high for a midfielder. You'd expect him to be winning the ball back a lot and breaking up the play a lot, but it is still fairly high for an attacking midfielder. So who knows, maybe that's more so the thought process, is he's in there to win the ball back, not so much to try to score and create. But with all that being said though, probably going to rate him at a 7. Just like Caicedo, I do think there's probably more he can contribute to the team. The fact that they won, I think, does bump his rating up a little bit in my mind. Now we're on to Malo Gusto, who only played 7 minutes, which isn't correct because he came in at the 83rd minute, so probably more so like 12 to 15. But you can't really see it down here because it's just off the screen, but he's one of the 3 players that came on late that didn't even get a rating, so there's not a whole lot to talk about with him. But in the little bit of time that he played, he had 6 out of 7 accurate passes. You can also see from his heat map here, he did get up in the attack, which is something that obviously we know he likes to do. 7 touches. He only had 1 attempted long ball, and that didn't come off. And then he only had 1 ground duel, and he lost it. He did commit 1 foul. So, yeah, not much time on the pitch. Didn't do a whole lot with it, but the little bit he did do doesn't seem that impressive to me. I'm a well-known Malo Gusto hater at this point, so probably going to be a bit more critical. But honestly, I would love for him to prove me wrong. I mean, a lot of people have talked about, I know Matt from the Stanford Sink, something we talked about when we did the keep, loan, sell with Gusto. We won't have that many options at right wing back if that's what Xabi Alonso decides to do. I know we're very close to signing a guy from Atalanta who does play right wing back, so hopefully he comes in and does well. But even if we do, there's still a question of who else is there. You know, James, as many people have talked about, he's not going to be that bombing right wing back anymore. At most, he'll be the right center back, or he'll be in the center mid. And yeah, maybe there are a couple of wings that can play over there, but are they going to want to play at wing back? There's a lot of unknowns about that, so having somebody that does play right wing back and has been shown to play there well in the past, it would be a good option to have. But personally, I've just seen so much from him this season that that's why I'm against him staying. But we'll see what happens. But I did want to talk about, since he did get a little bit of a cameo, I did want to at least discuss that possibility. And we'll talk about the Palestra signing, assuming it does officially go through, because it's still in the latter stages at this point when I'm doing the video. I will discuss all the transfers. I think I'm planning on doing just a full wrap-up of any transfers that happened in June at the end of the month. Granted, there may not be a whole lot to talk about, but we'll see when we get there. But next up, we have Nicholas Jackson. Like I said, when we were talking about the ratings, definitely not a very impressive performance from him. From his heat map here, you can see he was kind of drifting to the left side a bit, which we know he can do. He did get in the box a little bit, but not as much as he was sort of staying deeper. But that's not really surprising, because it's what we saw from him at Chelsea. He likes to drop in, he likes to get on the ball, try to connect. But he did play the full 90 minutes. He got 1 assist. His expected goals, not great. 16 out of 19 accurate passes. For somebody who wants to get on the ball a lot, probably should be a bit better. 1 chance created, 1 big chance created, probably his assist. 1 shot on target, 1 shot off target. Probably should be more for a striker, to be fair. And he had 1 block shot, 28 touches, so he didn't get on the ball that much, and I think that's something that is disappointing for him because, like I said, he does want to be a player that gets on the ball. 7 touches in the opposition box is very low. He only tried 1 dribble and failed. 3 passes into the final third, dispossessed once, offside twice, and only had 1 defensive contribution. As far as his duels, he did win 4 out of 5 aerial duels, which is good because he wasn't typically good in the air when he was at Chelsea, but he lost 2 of his ground duels, so that's not great. But like I said before, I think this is disappointing in the sense of and I know a few others, we do want Jackson to come back. We do want him to be given a chance alongside João Pedro to see if he can be a quality striker because there were moments, there were glimpses of what he could bring. I just think, unfortunately, the way Maresca utilized him was not very conducive to the type of player he is, and obviously they kind of had a falling out, which is why he didn't want to come back for this past season. But the thing is, he's 25, so he could be getting into those peak years for a striker, and I think there's still a player potentially in there. I know he doesn't look it at the moment. I know it feels like he's not going to be that player because he just has kept falling off, but I do feel like this is kind of the last chance to get that player to come out of him. If he doesn't reach those levels by the end of this season, I do feel like it's going to be too late. He's going to be a little bit too old to really say he's still got potential. So that's why I'm really hoping that he comes back, Xabi Alonso gets a good look at him, can really work with him and get him back to some of what we saw under Pochettino and under Maresca's first season, because there were a lot of good moments, especially between him and Palmer. They connected so well. I think if you have him in there as an option with João Pedro as well, both of them going for the starting spot, even utilizing him, as some people have talked about, as an inside forward on the left side, I think it provides a very interesting option that I hope we can see utilized well. Hi, this is Mason from a few minutes later in the video. So yeah, I forgot to do ratings for Jackson and for Neto, so I'm just going to put those in wherever they make sense. So for Jackson, I think I'm probably going to give him a 6.2. I think the assist does help bump him up a little bit, but by his standards, I do want to see more from him. I want to see him really involved in the attack. I want to see him creating opportunities, getting on the ball, trying to make things happen, and he just didn't do that. So 6.2, I think, is about right. But anyways, that's my little Jackson rant done. Moving on, we have Pedro Neto. As I said, the least impressive performance out of a 5-0 win for Portugal, and even on FotMob, it's a little bit higher, but still the worst performance out of the starting 11. Only played 45 minutes, he was taken off at halftime, 16 out of 18 accurate passes, 25 touches, 2 in the opposition box. He only attempted 2 dribbles and succeeded once, 1 pass in the final third, 1 inaccurate cross, which is just not good for a wing, and then did nothing defensively. He had 2 recoveries, which, as I said in the first video, that's kind of what I expect Neto to do. I expect him to help win the ball back because he does that well. He is a hard worker. He wants to win the ball back, and he didn't do anything. So yeah, pretty damning indictment about his performance in this one, but this is also something that I think a lot of us do expect from Neto. He's kind of gotten to that point where he will turn up and have a great game, get an assist, get a couple good goals, and everybody's excited to see more of him, and then he'll turn into a performance like this, where he's basically non-existent. His passes aren't great, his attack isn't great, his crosses aren't great. So I do understand the frustration with Neto, and as I said before, I think he's a player that I would like to keep because of his hard work. Granted, I think that hard work needs to be focused, but it's great to have a workhorse like him up top that will try to win the ball back, even though he didn't really do it in this match. Now, whether he's going to fit into Xabi Alonso's system remains to be seen, because if he does go with wingbacks, will Neto want to play at a wingback position? If he does, probably have to be on the left side since he's a left-footed player. And from what I understand about Xabi Alonso's wingbacks, they more so stay wide and they hit crosses, so he would have to play on the left side in that regard. But I just think he's a player that his hard work is not something that can just be found from any attacking player, so I would love to keep him because of that. For Neto, I'm going to give him a 5. I know it seems a bit low, especially considering they won 5-0, but considering it doesn't seem like he was a part of that at all, I think that's very disappointing for a player of his caliber, and it's something that it does frustrate me because I want to see him getting more involved to show that he's not still inconsistent when it comes to providing in the attack. And then the final player to talk about, Reece James, once again played the full 90, which is good in a sense because it shows he's fit enough to play the full 90s. It is a little concerning though because he's playing so much, and I think we're all concerned about his fitness levels. But yeah, his heat map, very much up and down the right-hand side. Honestly, pretty surprising to see that he is getting up into the final third a lot. Now granted, as I said, Ghana were sitting in a bit deeper, so he probably felt comfortable getting up into the attack a bit more. But also, as I mentioned before, the fact that he's in these positions and he's not finding any killer crosses or killer passes that we've seen him do before, it is a little bit concerning, and it's something that I do expect from him. But looking at James's stats, so obviously no goals and assists because there were none in this game. 61 out of 65 accurate passes, 2 chances created, 1 big chance created that probably should be higher, as I said before. He had 87 touches, 2 in the opposition box, 7 passes into the final third, 1 out of 4 accurate crosses, and that's not a good look. His crosses are kind of his bread and butter. 2 out of 3 accurate long balls. Of his 3 defensive contributions, 2 tackles, 1 interception. He had 7 recoveries overall. He did win 100% of his ground duels, but he did lose 3 aerial duels, which not great. But yeah, it's a performance that in my mind, it's not terrible. He did at least help him keep a clean sheet, so that's good. But part of the reason why so many people say he's one of the best right backs in the world is not just because of his defensive work, it's because he also provides quite a bit in the attack. And honestly, based on these defensive contributions, doesn't seem like he really had to do much defensively. So I think I'll probably give him a 6. Because for me, 6 is sort of the average. You did your job, but you didn't do anything special. You didn't make any mistakes. And he did do his job technically by keeping the clean sheet, but I think he probably should have done more. There's more he could have done in the attack to help them get that all-important goal. But that'll do it for my thoughts on the Chelsea players in the World Cup for the second round of matches. And there are definitely some disappointing performances in this one. There's also disappointment in the fact that some of these players could be gone in the next match, especially when looking at the likes of Jackson and at Caicedo. These are 2 players that I would like to see them perform more, but at the same time, there's the added benefit of they get to go back, they get to rest more, they get to work with Xabi Alonso, get integrated into his system sooner rather than later. So I guess you could take the good with the bad on that. But for Fernandes, I will say I want to see some better performances from him, mostly because there's a lot of talk that we're going to offload him, and I think these performances aren't going to convince anybody to splash the cash on him. And I think we need them to, because he is a good player. I think he can be very useful for us, and he's the type of player that could command a very high price, which would help open up some funds for us to go get some players to fill holes in the team. But again, these types of performances, the very average, drab performances, they're not going to convince anybody to spend that kind of money, so that's also a bit disappointing. But fingers crossed that the third match does bring a lot more excitement and a lot more joy for our Blues. But with all that being said, that'll do it for me, so cue the outro. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe for more Chelsea previews, reviews, and talks. Also, let me know what your thoughts are down below, whether you agree, disagree, or just want to call me stupid. Let me know, we can talk about it, discuss all that good stuff. Also, if you want to hear me talk about TV shows and movies that I like, check out my channel Mason the Brock Henderson, where I upload reviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As well as if you want to watch me play through video games and try to make it entertaining for you, I have a Let's Play channel, Meso Hendo Plays, where I upload every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Also, if you do want to help me grow this channel, I do have a Patreon where all the funds and donations will go directly into improving this channel's quality. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to y'all later. Peace out, and up the Chels.